So, Andy, that leads us on to the last piece of this week's podcast.
That's right. It's a very short piece, and we're going to be talking about the things that you need to let the licensing authority, or the DVLA to you and I, you need to let them know if you've had certain medical conditions. Now, there's a whole host of medical conditions. In fact, there's over 100 of these conditions that you would need to let the DVLA know if you've experienced symptoms of these. And the reason you need to let them know is you could be liable for £1,000 fine should you have been involved in an accident, and they can tie it back to that medical condition. So what I'll do is I'll read through some of the ones that you and I will probably expect to be on there. It kind of makes sense, just to give you an idea of some of these serious conditions that you need to let them know about. But then I'm going to list a few more, because these are ones that you wouldn't necessarily think would be on there.
Yeah, so we're not going to go through all 100 plus conditions, but as you say, there are some on there that I think there are people listening to this podcast wouldn't realise they probably should be telling the DVLA about the condition they're suffering from.
That's right, and the reason that the DVLA need you to let them know is because some of these conditions can be linked to potential problems if you're driving, and of course they want to take a look at those conditions and work out if it's going to be an issue with you driving on UK's roads. Now, of course, they may decide, one, that they'll take your licence away. That's something they could do, and obviously I know that's potentially quite daunting to do that, but it is a legality. They might decide to restrict the amount of years that you need to renew your licence. So in normal circumstances, you renew your licence every 10 years. They might say you need to do it every 5 years if you've got a certain condition, or every 2 years. So this is why they're asking for you to do this as a UK licence holder. So let's go through some of these conditions then. The most obvious ones, if you like, are the main conditions. Things like diabetes, heart conditions, and that includes atrial fibrillation, if you've had pacemakers, if you suffer from sleep conditions such as sleep apnea, narcolepsy, for instance. It kind of makes sense. Obviously, you're a danger if you're falling asleep at the wheel. Things like epilepsy, strokes, and things that affect your eyesight, things like glaucoma.
So those are the conditions you'd first think of when you're talking about reporting conditions to the DVLA. Of course, there's some other conditions you might not necessarily realise that you might have to report to the DVLA. We have to put out there that it's all based on individual circumstances. So if any of the conditions that we mention, you actually have them, you need to go and check whether you need to report them to the DVLA, because obviously very personal to the individual. We'll put a link in the notes for where you can find out more information.
That's right. We'll put a link to the article that mentions all 118 conditions, but here are some of the ones that are slightly more unusual, slightly more left field. So there are things like bipolar disorders, manic depression. And actually going further into depression, there are a lot of mental health conditions that, even though not connected with anything to do with driving, could have implications with the DVLA wanting to know more about that condition. So just something to think about. Even something as fairly simple and mundane as blood pressure issues, and it's to do in that sense with the particular medication that you take, because it's the medication that might have some side effects that could impact your driving. There are other conditions such as broken limbs. Now, if you've taken more than 3 months off of work and taken 3 months off of driving, the DVLA need to know about that, because 3 months is a significant amount of time to be off of work and off of driving, so they'd need to look further into that. Other things that you would need to consider that you wouldn't necessarily think of is drug use. So any history of illegal drug use or misused prescription drugs, you'd need to let them know. Obsessive compulsive disorders, so OCD, that's on there. Any sort of OCD, you'd need to let them know. And again, they'll make a judgment on that. And this last one is a bit sort of arbitrary. It's kind of, it encapsulates everything. It's just surgery. If you've had surgery of any kind, and again, it's major surgery that has required you to take a significant period of time off of work and therefore driving. So a good example of that is a caesarean section. If you've not been driving for 3 months or more through having surgery, you'd need to let them know. Or you could face £1,000 fine following an accident. So yeah. Interesting stuff.
So that is it for this week, isn't it, Andy, on the podcast? So as ever, if you've enjoyed the show, please make sure you go and review it. Give us 5 stars, of course, and you could get the Money to the Masses mug. As ever, go to the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Money to the Masses. Make sure you join the conversation there. And of course, go and find us on YouTube as well. With some of this podcast will be on YouTube. We are doing more and more stuff on YouTube, particularly around savings rates if you're interested in that. And of course, don't forget to follow us on all of our social channels.
That's it. So that's it for us this week. We're done. Until next time.
Until next time.